Yeah, only my signal, so yeah, I wonder what my partner sent me in the background there. Yes, I think everything's recording. I showed that before. Press record is one of the first things from live performance, I remember. So my name is Steve, drusnoise. I do experimental sound art stuff, also a lot of live techno, and I also do sustainability research, mainly on energy system transition and future of cities. And I kind of combine those two things together. That's how I got my artist name. When I was doing my PhD, my niece and nephew started calling me Dr. Uncle Steve. So I took the DRUS from Dr. Uncle Steve and added noise. So drusnoise is my artist name. And I really like sort of bringing those things together, playing with plants, CO2 data, converted to MIDI. I've got permission from a bunch of different academics to use their sustainability lectures in my tracks. And I have a website and project called sustain.fm, where I do a monthly podcast interviewing different artists working with sound and music and sustainability. And I really believe that the power, like ever since there have been humans, artists have been telling stories. And I really like the idea that we can tell different stories and engage people through emotions in a different way that graphs and charts and data, because we've been trying for 50 years of just telling people, like, be more sustainable, be more sustainable. And it does not work. So is there a way we can actually build a community, connect with people, reimagine the world, see the world in a different way? So doing that with sound is one of the things that I like to play with. But today I'm not going to be talking too much about that, more a little bit about how I approach live performance. And it was really cool actually having Veerle first, because as she mentioned, a lot of the elements that we use are very similar and sometimes the exact same, but use them in very different ways. And both of us also play very different styles. So what you saw Veerle play earlier tonight, we did a show at Aku last Friday in Utrecht. And there it was super heavy, glitchcore, breakbeat, I don't know, 172, 175 beats a minute, so boom, 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 boom. So it's interesting, it's very similar with the same setup. So that's also one of the things that the modular can actually do different kind of things. So before I get into the gear, a couple of high-level things around the way I like to think about performance. The first one is really thinking about telling stories. And actually, before I get into that, how many people here are into performing live electronic? I've done that before. Okay, cool. And how many people actually would like to do that or interested in doing it? Okay, cool. Great. So what I'm going to sort of share is a couple of the things that I try and keep in mind, things that I've learned from my own experience, but also from a lot of things going wrong and learning from that. So I co-founded the Berlin Modular Society in Berlin about 3 years ago. We've done events pretty much once a month. So I've seen hundreds of live electronic acts, both sort of ambient, experimental, techno, house, breakbeat, everything in between. And one of the biggest challenges I find is that people can have amazing sounds and amazing gear, but if they're not really telling a story, if they're not really bringing the audience along, people get kind of bored. And I was just saying to people outside that if you're playing a club set, it's really obvious. People either dance or they leave to go get a drink. They're really into it or they're looking at their phone. So it's an immediate kind of response. So one of the things I think about a lot is how do you tell stories through variation of intensity? And okay, this is a bit of an age check. Who's old enough to remember the movie Saving Private Ryan? Okay, this is a skewing older kind of audience. Okay, so I don't know why I said great, but it is. So if you think about variations in intensity in electronic music, that could be volume, it could be beats per minute, it could be how many instruments there are, it could be how full the frequency spectrum is. And if you think about Saving Private Ryan, that movie started super intense. The first 20 minutes, that crazy beach battle scene, and then it kind of tails down a little bit. They sort of go through the countryside. Spoiler alert, they do save Private Ryan. No. And there's a little sort of, the movie is like 20 years old, like seriously. And then there's like a little sort of denouement at the end. So you could imagine building a live set like that, where as soon as you press play, boom, and then kind of bring people down, and then slow, and then up. Okay, this is another spoiler coming up, but this play is like 300 years old, Romeo and Juliet. Does anyone not know how Romeo and Juliet ends? Okay, so no spoiler problem. So that's kind of an opposite, where there's like a slow start, a little dual scene at the beginning, but it's really like a slow build through the whole play to the climactic death scene, and then a bit of a denouement at the end. So you could also imagine building a live set like that. Or you can imagine basically any episodes of Game of Thrones where it's like up, down, beheading, wedding, sex scene, peasants traveling along the road. It's up, down, but it always ends really up top as a cliffhanger to bring you back for the next episode. So thinking about what are the stories that you want to tell. And of course, all three of those examples are very much Western traditions of how stories work. There's many different ways of doing stories. There's circular stories, arrhythmical stories, atonal stories, stories that don't have a start and an end in a traditional way that sort of Western classical literature thinks about that. But the more you think about telling a story on stage, the easier it is to bring an audience along. And that applies whether you're doing a drone set, an experimental set, a club set, anything like that. The other thing I think is really important that I learned the hard way is thinking about who's the star of the show. So if you think about a stage play, you could have 10 actors on stage, but at any given point, it's obvious who you're supposed to be paying attention to. One person is speaking, they may walk closer to the edge of the stage, or one person speaks and there's a dialogue between two characters, or there's a chorus at the back. And when I first started playing live, the feedback I got was that, Steve, it's like you have 10 lead characters and they're all talking at the same time. And it's just sort of total chaos and people can't really hear what's going on. So you can vary that based on what's loudest, what instrument is in the center, if you have different effects. And I think Veerle's set was a really great example of that. As she was moving through, different radios took on the starring role. Sometimes it was a drum machine that was the starring role. She would find an interesting little snippet of audio that would get louder, the other things would drop in. That keeps your interest rather than just being a wall of sound, unless you actually want to make a wall of sound, which is totally cool too. Another thing is really this idea of contrast and consistency. So human brains really like contrast. Light, dark, loud, quiet, digital, analog, clean, dirty. Those are really fun to play with. But if your live sets are all contrasts, it can kind of fall apart a little bit and doesn't really have some kind of consistency. So what are the ways you can actually connect that together so you have the contrast, but also have it hold together? So with my set, for example, I'll often have, like that's a very round kind of analog kick, but if I have,
Today we have quantum information.
If I have, say, this sound here, oops, this is the problem of not having quite enough light. So that's a very obviously digital kind of sound, but having that, when you have the combination and the contrast between analog and digital, can be quite nice to play with. And then the one final thing, which is the thing that I pay attention to most, is a quote from Brian Eno. He talked about his music being a dance between control and surrender. And I really love that idea, where for dance music, there needs to be some kind of control. You've got to have a kick drum, you've got to have some kind of regular rhythm so that people can dance to it, so you have to have control. But if there's too much control, it gets really, really boring really, really fast, and it's just completely repetitive, nothing's changing. If you have too much surrender on the dance floor, it can be interesting sonically, but really hard to dance to. And this is some feedback I got from my partner Anya on the set that I played last week at Aku. We're in the middle of a set, and I'll play that tonight. The beats kind of fall away a little bit, and it was really interesting, but people didn't necessarily quite know what to do on the dance floor. So if it's not the 4/4 kick. So I always like that, the way that talked about it as a dance between those. It's not control or surrender, but it's sort of balancing and dancing kind of between those. So one of the ways that we can play with that is sort of using different kind of random elements. So could I get a volunteer from the audience that wants to put some medical pads on their skin? Okay, yes, please. Thank you. So can I get your arm, please? Okay, so what's happening now is... Yeah, this is the surrender part, exactly, yes. So could you maybe just turn just a little bit so they can see the pads? Yeah, cool, thank you. So our display model here, no, sorry. So those pads there, it's sending a little electrical current into this pad and then measuring how long it takes to come back from that pad. So one of the things that's interesting is that your skin and my skin would be different because we have both different blood pressure, body temperature, body mass index, heart rate, all these kind of things that affect our skin resistance. So that's actually going into here. You can see these sort of flashing lights here. So we can say, okay, we're going to take this and we're going to trigger this sound. And then we're going to take this one and make this the pitch of this sound. If we open this up, just 1 sec, so those sounds are being triggered by the skin that's on here. So what I find really interesting about this is that this is not actually clocked to a beat. The pitches are not actually in any kind of scale. So it's just really quite random things. But if we actually put something on it, like, then now it actually, our brains love and crave rhythm. So they're grabbing onto this thing that's not actually on any kind of rhythm, but our brains are sort of almost interpreting it as it is. So thank you very much. Take that off, thank you very much. So usually when I'm performing on stage, thank you, big round of applause for our volunteers. Thank you. So usually when I'm on stage, I usually have a plant on stage, and I'll put the pads on the plant. Unfortunately, the plants we have here are plastic, which do not actually, which is a good metaphor for sustainability, I guess, but are not really conducting that electricity. And actually, one of the reasons I'm actually here is I'm doing a residency in Veerle studio, and I just picked up the other day a glass terrarium, and we're going to be building electric data sensor terrarium, so it'll have light sensors and temperature sensors and all kinds of things to actually look at how is the environment around us actually affecting us and making sound, which I think is an interesting matter. I did a project in Austria using air quality data translated to sound, because the air is all around us, but unless you're actually standing next to a diesel truck or the air quality is really, really bad, we don't notice it, even though the air that we're breathing is always affecting us all the time. So I like playing with those things. And another one is interesting is, could I have another volunteer, please? A different volunteer? A different volunteer? There is a little bit of electricity, but not a lot of electricity.
How will we find
Okay.
connected to your eyes?
Exactly, yes. I'll bring out the needles now. So if I just get your finger, please. Here. Okay. And maybe just turn around a little bit so people can see that on your finger. Okay. So can you see this red light flashing there?
No. Well, I mean,
Very small.
Okay. This one right here.
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I just looked at this. Can you see the red light flashing? That's really not a good question to ask with this setup. So this little heartbeat, that's picking up the heartbeat detected there. So now we can actually say, so this was the sound that I played earlier. I'm just manually triggering that, but instead what I can do is plug the cable from the heartbeat monitor.
Let's see if it's in sync.
Can you try to jump in down a little bit? Okay, and now the opposite. Can you close your eyes and deep breath and try and slow down, just relax.
Wow. It's so good and relaxing. It's crazy. Now it's getting up again.
So there's another, so thank you very much. Thank you, another big round of applause. Thank you. That I like to play with, because heartbeats are regular, but they're not exactly regular. And as you can see, they kind of go up and down. And often if I'm playing, let's say, 160 beats a minute, 175 beats a minute, it would actually be really bad if your heartbeat was 175 beats a minute. Like that's sort of called an ambulance kind of territory. So, but again, as I sort of brought in the hats there and the kick, our brains sort of lock onto that rhythm. So that's one of the things that I like playing with, this idea of control and surrender, of having elements of randomness from data, from plants, from heartbeats. I'll often just do exactly what I did there and wave someone up from the dance floor and put their, so that it actually becomes part of the set as it's playing live, which is pretty fun. And then also, what's another one here? I've lost it. Oh, here it is. So this is where's the camera? So this is just a little solar panel, and all it does is when there's light, it sends out a high voltage, and when there's no light, it sends a low voltage. So if we take this cable out here, actually I should remember where I actually unplug that other cable, otherwise this is not going to work. So now we could say, let's plug this into here. So that's high pitch there. So I can actually play that just using the light source. So I also kind of like that approach of just being able to take all those ambient sources, and Veerle was saying as well in her talk around the unexpected. I like that as well, where I'll talk in a minute about how I set up my set. So definitely I like things to be planned and sort of have that structure of that story. But when someone's heartbeat comes in, I have no idea how fast that's going to be. When I connect to a plant, I have no idea what it's going to do. When I use the light, you can kind of control it, but when you're doing a sound check and all the lights are on in the club, that's completely different than right now where you've only got a couple of little lights. And even working with plants, when I do a rehearsal at 3 in the afternoon, the plant's very active, the notes are bouncing around all over the place. At 4 in the morning, when I'm playing in a club, the plant is asleep, and the notes are kind of going kind of slowly. So I really like that idea of it kind of forces me to react. And I think that's also another interesting metaphor for thinking about the future and sustainability, is that we can do all the planning that we want, but really we need to be able to observe and react and be resilient and improvise in response to what the future is bringing us. So that's kind of the way I approach sort of playing a set, and that applies pretty much no matter what kind of music I'm playing. But in terms of what I actually brought, there is some stuff. Do we actually have any of the same modules, Veerle? Maybe not. Yeah, so it's, no, I don't think we do. So anyway, so I've got the modular set up here, but I've also got these two pieces here. This one is the Electron Octatrack, and this is basically designed, this is kind of like the heart and the brain of my system. So this has all of the background samples or vocals that I'm using. It also acts as my mixer. So all of these sounds are feeding in here and then feeding out to the PA. It also is really nice because it's got a looper built in. So for example, if I start playing, so yeah, you're not going to be able to see, but right now the little plus sign went on, so it just recorded a 4-bar loop of that. And then if I can freeze that, or play it in reverse, or slow it down. So it makes it really nice for doing transitions, because I can sort of say, okay, I'm going to do that freeze frame. Or yeah, so it gives a lot of flexibility in playing with the different sounds. And then this is the analog rhythm, which is the drum machine, and it's one of my favorites. This is a quite old version of it, but I love it because it has both the analog synthesizer, so you can create your own drum sounds from scratch. So you can tune it to be exactly what you want, or you can load in samples. So I really like being able to combine the two of those. I have my phone constantly recording voice memos, little snippets of sound that I can layer in. So I mentioned about that contrast as well, where I could have a nice round analog kick, and then on top of that, like a distorted sample of wind noise that I recorded walking down the street, just to give it a little bit of a different kind of tinge. And then I've also got two different synthesizers over here. This one is a bit smaller, and it's called, so these are modular, and this is called semi-modular. Basically because it means that this is a standalone synthesizer. You don't need to connect it to anything. You can kind of play it by itself, but it has all the same kind of jacks as these modules. So I could plug it in and have the sounds and the voltages and everything sort of connecting back and forth. So I like having those kind of things. And maybe I'll just actually play so you can hear that one. So that's the raw sound. And then I also have it going through this delay. Which is really a lot of fun to play live. So Veerle was mentioning getting lost in the sound. This is what I usually get lost in when there's like drums going and I'm just playing with those sounds. Because by itself, that's a relatively dry kind of sound, right? There's not a huge amount going on. But you can get a lot of really interesting sounds that are coming through that way. And then what else do I have? So a couple of effects. The modular system, you've already heard the sounds that are coming out of that, and I can't remember what I did to the patch, so I don't know what's going to happen when I start playing. Maybe this is the one. We'll see what happens when I plug this in. Okay. So I've got a couple of sound sources, but the idea of modular synths that has these are individual modules, but also a key part of that is modulation. So you can see these lights that are flashing on kind of like different irregular rhythms. What that is doing is it's sending out waves that are either going like this or pulses, depending on that. So I can actually change the character of the sound. And the same with this one too. You can see the lights, they really speed up in their flashing, or I can slow that down. So this is one of the key things with, I was saying to someone earlier that outside, they asked if having musical experience is important, because they had a piano background. Half of the bass lines I play are one note, but being able to change and modulate the sound, it sort of gives that sort of rich character and kind of gives that flavor. And then the other thing I have at the end here, I don't know if you can see this, this is the analog heat. So this has distortion and compression and EQ and some effects, which is also really nice for doing transitions, because I've got, Veerle mentioned only having two hands, so I've got a third hand down here. So this pedal that cuts out all the lows, which is really, any DJ knows that trick. If you want to make the crowd go wild, take out all the bass, and eventually add some sort of filters, and then boom, drop the bass back in again. So it's just, with having the pedal and having those effects, it gives me the chance that I can do things with these hands and not have to worry about having a third hand for the filter of those things. I can't even remember how long I've been talking. How long have I been talking? Okay.
15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay, that's not too bad, actually. Okay.
That doesn't matter.
Okay. So I think, yeah, so the other thing I was going to say about I basically never play with the same setup twice. So this is the other thing that I really like, is I've played a lot, and I like the consistency of knowing what I'm doing, but I also like the surprise of when I bring a new sound in, especially if I'm not wearing my reading glasses and I don't know exactly what's been going on. And I usually can't wear my glasses on stage, because when I play techno, I jump around and dance a lot, and then the glasses like fly off into the middle of the dance floor somewhere. So when I bring in a new sound, I'm often not sure exactly what that sound is going to be. Or if I'm bringing in a synthesizer I haven't used for 6 months, I can't remember exactly what some of the features and functions do. And I really enjoy that part of having to pay attention and having to respond to that. And actually, my partner, Anya, she said a while ago, let all the right things go wrong, which is sort of turned into our motto, because the The only guaranteed thing for playing a live set is that something will go wrong. You have no idea what it is. Some cable, a laptop will crash, a cable will break, a sequencer will stop working, your effects pedal breaks, something will happen. So I enjoy being, okay, so given that, how do I ride that? How do I enjoy that? Well, that's an interesting sound that I hadn't discovered yet. So I really like being able to have a bit of the control and planning and the consistency of doing that. But I do like having a bit of a backup. So in the Octatrack here, in the background, I've actually got some full tracks that are like 5-minute long, like ones that I've already released. So if things kind of go off the rails and a break and this needs to reset, I could actually play like a 5-minute track that's not live, it's just sort of playing back, but that lets me a chance to sort of fix a cable, swap in it, maybe reboot something, unplug a power cable, figure what's wrong, and then come back into it. And then for my own cheat sheets, I have these little cards here. So this is the first track that we're gonna, this is really hard to do actually, doing this backwards. So I have a card like this for all the tracks that I play. And I think in tracks. I've been going to raves since 1993, however long ago that was. So the rhythm that I think about on the dance floor is tracks, which these days is like 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes for techno sets. So I think about what is that kind of story I'm going to tell within that. So I know the BPM, I know the pattern numbers, these are the samples here, this is what's on the drum machines, and it gives me almost all the time, all the bass lines that I play are either improvised or random, so I don't bother pre-programming those sequences. But I do like knowing what the drum patterns are. And the nice thing about having these cards, I've got a library of like, I don't know, 50, 60 of these things, so I will have my set planned, but just like I feel like it was actually, yeah, Friday night in the Uber on the way to the club, I was actually rearranging and reshuffling. I don't play that, don't play that. And then during a set, I can actually just toss something around and sort of bring those things in. So I like having, but since the great thing about live electronic and synthesizers that have presets is that you can save hundreds of them. You can have all kinds of different kits, you can have all these different samples, so that's amazing until you have to try and remember what's where. So that's why I need these cards to be able to help me kind of remember what's where. So that's kind of the way that I approach playing. So what I thought I would do is kind of give a bit of it's like a shortened kind of version of the sets that I play with, starting with, that shows a range of those kind of different techniques of a bit of the storytelling, definitely some of that control and surrender, some of the star of the show, and also one that I skipped over, this idea of let it breathe. That most people, when they're starting to play, the temptation is, especially if you've been rehearsing and practicing and listening to your own music a lot, is that this is getting boring, I need to have a new sound. Okay, now I need another sound. Okay, now I need another sound. And this idea of just letting it breathe, the audience, when they're hearing a new sound, they need 30 seconds, a minute to actually absorb and notice that new sound is there. And then a new sound can come in, and then a new sound can come in. Unless you're actually trying to deliberately overwhelm people with a whole cacophony of sound, which can be kind of fun. But if you're just constantly bringing in a new sound every 10 seconds, people haven't even got a chance to get used to listening to that, oh, that's an interesting rhythm pattern, or that's an interesting synth. So just taking that chance to kind of let that breathe. So those are some of the things that you may hear, or maybe not, depending on whether I plug these cables back into the right place. Okay, so I'm going to turn my microphone down and maybe kick drum up. Yeah. So with this one, let's see how we're doing here. Is that good? Louder. Nice. That's what I like.
Don't listen to Eichner.
No, he's deaf.
It'll always be
Yes.
louder.
agree.
How is this general
Always louder.
It'll always be louder. That's better.
Did I turn down?
You can hear it or do you feel it?
Okay.
You need to feel it, man.
So, and just so she's here in spirit, the voice you're going to hear at the start is my partner, Anya Mettelman. She's a quantum physics professor at KIT in Karlsruhe. And the recording is from a performance that we did together called Quantum Inspired Sound at last year's Berlin Science Week, where she was giving a lecture on quantum physics on a chalkboard. So she had one of these microphones, and then I had a contact microphone on the chalkboard, so it would catch the sounds of the chalk. So she was up on stage giving the lecture, and then I was down below with like a system like this, processing, because until I met her, I had no idea that quantum physicists also use oscillators, filters, amplifiers, resonators, exactly the same stuff that is here, except their oscillators are running at gigahertz frequencies, their filters are in these big cryostat tanks that are cooled down to just below or just above absolute zero. But anyway, so you can all say to welcome Anya.
Today we have Quantum Information Processing 101, and we're going to talk about how to build and read out a qubit. So if we want to build a qubit, a quantum bit, we need a logical basis of 0 and 1. So we need some discreteness and discrete states. In quantum mechanics, we have such objects as states. And the simplest example here for is the quantum harmonic oscillator. The Hamiltonian is an object given as h equal to omega c dagger c. Here, omega c is the resonance frequency, but the oscillator I always set h bar 1 and c at the data oscillation for fulfilling the normal photonic communication relation. We can straightforwardly determine the energy of such a system simply taking the expectation value of our Hamiltonian
Today's IPCC report is a helpful guide to infuse the climate plan. It's a survival guide for humanity. As it shows, the 1.5-degree limit is achievable, but it will take a total leader in climate action. This report is a credible call to massively fast-track climate efforts by every country and every sector and on every planet. In short, our law needs climate action on all fronts, everything, everywhere, all at once. I have proposed to the G20 a climate solution in which all the leaders make the consequences mobilize financial and technical resources to support emerging economies in a common effort to
So, yep, sorry. So, yeah, that's, hold on, I need water. So that was kind of, hopefully you could maybe see or hear or feel some of those elements I was talking about. The idea of the star of the show, there was definitely certain parts where one synth was more obvious. At the last part, it was really the breaks, the drums. That was the star of the show. The synths were kind of in the background, but you couldn't really hear them. The consistency and the contrast, definitely you can sort of hear some almost like 80s style, kind of like gentle kind of pads going in the background, combined with like the super harsh digital synths. And then the control and surrender, kind of playing with the pads. So that bass line was kind of running. I said, okay, I don't want to have those notes pre-programmed anymore. So I just connected my arm to this, and then so my skin resistance was playing those notes. So so that was kind of like a stripped down version of my set. Usually I play either 60 minutes or 90 minutes. I'm not sure how long that was. But yeah, I kind of get into it, especially with these things. So I guess that's it for my side. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Yeah.
so yes, exactly. So that's not the end of the evening. But wait, there's more. So Veerle and I are happy to take questions. You can either be sort of formal lecture style, sit there and yell the questions, or if you want to play or touch or move knobs or ask questions, feel free to come up here and ask questions about our performances, our style, our gear choices, the modules, how it works, pretty much anything. So yes, anyone have any questions or anyone want to come up here and check some stuff out closer up?
Is this what a typical quantum physics lesson is like?
I don't think
Sign me up.
so. She said she felt super cool because I did once a year the student union has a party and they invite the professors to do like a 20-minute DJ set, which usually just means picking a playlist and someone else kind of does it. But I made her a techno remix so she could actually play that for the students with her own voice, and she said she felt like a rock star. So. But I don't think it's common that that has that. But yeah, we are looking to do another performance together. So, any other questions?
I have a
Anyone
few,
wanna
but
come up and check something?
I also want to see the modulars.
Yeah, and anyone, please feel free to come up and look and ask questions. You don't need to kind of sit in the back there.
Maybe we can even just shut up here.
Oh yeah. Maybe so we don't get that feedback. We'll just turn that off.
How does it work with the light? The lights.
Oh yes, okay. So it's basically just a. So if you hold on to that, that's basically just like a solar, like a light sensitive panel. So
I can do it, but it's
maybe
intense.
just get the sound playing.
Good morning.
Sorry, I forgot how loud that was turned up.